It's been said that those who are least entitled to complain about something often do so the loudest. In psychology, the phenomenon is called projection, where someone who is doing something onerous accuses another party of the exact same thing that they themselves are doing. In grade school, this dynamic is known as I'm rubber, you're glueism. So it is with conservatives and what's come to be known as cancel culture. Every day, some conservative somewhere is warning Americans that the lefty cancel crew is coming for them, that a new purge reminiscent of Stalin, as they say, is underway, and that no one is safe. But did religious zealots forget that they themselves and other right-wingers started cancel culture? And what happens when these folks start getting a taste of their own medicine? Here to talk about it, Josh Holland. Josh, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Julianna.
So you've got on your Twitter, the right invented cancel culture and has always embraced it closely. And it's a bit wild to see them freaking out for getting just a little taste of their own medicine. To what taste of their own medicine were you referring?
Well, I mean, I don't want to give it too much credence in that. I don't think cancel culture means anything, right? It's an updated version of political correctness. It's just a shallow, hollow boogeyman. But to the degree it means exacting political, personal, professional costs for opinions that you disagree with, it has always been something that the right has embraced, going back to McCarthyism, when they actually drew up lists of people who they did not want to permit to work because they had views that they didn't appreciate or value. Conservatives are always boycotting multiple things. Right now, they're boycotting Disney. They're boycotting. I mean, the list goes on and on. They've been boycotting.
That's such a conflict. Them boycotting.
I mean, they've been boycotting Nike forever. The list goes on, and they've boycotted Walmart. They've boycotted Chick-fil-A, conservative-leaning companies, what we think of as conservative-leaning companies, for various forms of apostasy from the conservative line. They often punish companies that they think are too woke.
Do you think?
And I mean, it's just ballsy of them to project this onto the left as if this is something that the left that is unique to the left. Look, we could have a serious conversation about our culture's, sensitivity to things that are, humorous, perhaps ill-informed attempts at humor, etc. I think we're all cognizant that we live in a society where people are pretty sensitive, and we could have that conversation in a serious way, if not for the propagandistic claim that this is something that is that belongs to the left, or is something that woke people do. Anti-woke people have engaged in cancel culture much more than woke people have for a very long time.
I was reading one article that talked about the history of cancel culture, and the Puritans used to hang witches was one of the things that's canceling. That's canceling of a woman who wants to use tea tree oil or pet a cat. That's just canceling because they were outside of the the dogma of the time.
The religious right, for as long as I can remember, have been trying to get books. They go after books that normalize LGBTQ families, for example. This has always been a very high priority for them, is to try to get those books removed from libraries and bookstores, from schools, etc., etc. This is a very rich tradition, and here you have this situation where the estate of
we're talking about Dr. Seuss now.
Thank you, Dr. Seuss, and I forget his real name. Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss's estate has withdrawn 6 of his more obscure books that are, outdated.
I'm a millionaire because I have one of those books now. they are selling on eBay for like.
I mean, it is hilarious that these anti-cancel culture warriors are just showering massive amounts of money on the people who are supposedly canceling these books, which is the estate of Dr. Seuss. But before that, again, there was. I just remember these consistent efforts to keep these books that, like there was one that was called Heather Has Two Mommies, for example. Mm-hmm. That was one of the most canceled, if you will, books of the 90s. That there was a whole campaign. It was a huge, big kerfuffle. And it's so different than this situation with Dr. Seuss in that this is Dr. Seuss's own estate. They're trying to protect his brand, their brand, right, which they own. And here was a campaign by people to try to get others to not have access to books that they disagreed with. It was real. It was the real deal of what they have now kind of twisted around. I mean, we could step back and look at this in a bigger picture, in a bigger context, which is that the right learned from the civil rights movement, really, that there is a great deal of political capital in claiming that you are being oppressed and that you are a minority that faces discrimination.
I like what you said, claiming that you're being oppressed as opposed to actually being oppressed.
I mean, it is absolutely ludicrous to think that white Christians are oppressed or face any kind of discrimination in this country, and yet that is a touchstone for much of the conservative movement right now.
Well, it's very interesting because it's part of the fabric of Christianity, because they're studying their reverence for Jesus, who was oppressed, and then people are supposed to kind of relate to their oppressed savior, and so this idea of victimhood just is just really in the fabric of their belief.
I almost think you're giving them too much credit, though, to go back to Jesus, right? I mean, we're talking about the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah. These people
he was an oppressed Jew, though.
Well taken point, my friend.
He wasn't a Christian, right? He was a brown oppressed Jew. He was exactly the type of people that they would want DHS to keep out if he tried to show up in JFK Airport.
Aren't you people the Crusades people, like you, who are saying you're oppressed? You guys went to somebody else's house and you killed them all. It's a little bit of a.
But getting back to just in contemporary times, the right has learned consistently from the left, from where the left has had success, and I absolutely think that they saw the success of the civil rights movement. And later, the fight for the ERA, even though it didn't get over the hump, right? That was part of a broader period where people were saying, "Look, we are fighting for our rights and our rights to be treated equally." And that was a powerful message, and they've sought to emulate that, even though they are, overrepresented in government, in big businesses, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's like literally ridiculous to think that white Christians are facing any kind of discrimination whatsoever, but it's a powerful argument as a rallying cry. It's a powerful rallying cry.
We've already been talking a little bit about this, but just more directly, do you think there's a difference between the right's cancel culture, what they're actually doing, and the left's? Because it's not like the left, folks on the left aren't jumping on even to their own people to say you're not as woke as you need to be, et cetera.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
A difference between the two.
Well, I mean, the obvious difference is what the irritants are, what sets them off, what sets our people off. But I think that there is more of a willingness to use government power. Ironically, more of a willingness to use government power on the right. They are, frequently making laws that are, blatantly unconstitutional laws about, people in public universities not being allowed to say this or that. There was a law in Florida that said that, doctors weren't allowed to It was a crime. They tried to make it a crime. I'm not sure if this passed or not, but they tried to make it a crime for doctors to talk to their patients about gun ownership in the household, as if it was a public health issue or a health issue. And they're trying to, right now, they're trying to block funding in a number of states for schools that teach the 1619 curriculum or teach any kind of, racially accurate history of the United States, I guess. These efforts you tend to not see as much on the left, but I'm not sure. It's hard to say. I think, again, that there's no culture. I don't want to give too much credence to the idea that the cancel culture is real. People are sensitive. People like to lash out against people that they disagree with on the internet. That's not new. It's not unique to left or right. It is what it is. And this is it's a boogeyman. It's a distraction from issues that matter. And you can see that right now. Like, the conservative media is like freaking out over this stuff as if there's nothing else going on when there are other really important things happening right now. I mean, it's
they're making up some boogeyman so that people won't realize that a very large check is coming to their house to help them pay the bills that Trump left on their desk.
They certainly want to distract from that. I mean, I think that the biggest thing right now on the right is trying to move on from the January 6th insurrection. But I mean, I agree that that's part of it too. They don't want to talk about what's happening in the country for real. So they're making up nonsense. I mean, look, the Mr. Potato Head kerfuffle. Can I say Potato Ghazi? Is it Potato Ghazi?
Yeah, I'm not really even clear on what happened with that. I can't keep up with all the banned and bannings.
I mean, this whole thing was worth noting just because it was entirely based on a false premise, right? The Associated Press put out a story saying that Hasbro, the manufacturer of Mr. and I think Mrs. Potato Head. I'm not a potato head expert here, but
there is a Mrs. Yes,
I believe there is a Mrs. and maybe a baby potato. I don't know.
That I don't know.
But Hasbro is the manufacturer, and I guess they had said that they are de-emphasizing the gender of Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head in their packaging, but they weren't changing it to gender neutral. It was still going to be Mr. Potato Head and Mrs. Potato Head. It was just going to be a design change on the package. But the initial Associated Press story made it seem like there was a bigger thing than that. Not that any of this matters. Like, it's not
going in the same bathroom. It's a disaster. Yeah.
I mean, if you're, so this was something that very quickly, the company put out a statement and the Associated Press corrected its story. And they said, we're not changing anything. We're just changing the packaging design or whatever. They were making some minor adjustment, but it was still going to be gendered plastic tubers, right? You're still going to have a Mr. Plastic tuber and a Mrs. Plastic tuber, right? So the kerfuffle was over nothing. But
the thing about the potatoes is you can take the Mrs. stuff and put it on the Mr. stuff if you want to. You can do whatever you want.
Listen, once you mash them all together and put some gravy on it, it doesn't really matter. Once you fry it up and put ketchup on it, it does not.
Yes.
Right? It's like, who cares, man?
The murder of the Potato Head family. Okay.
But the point that I was getting to is that, immediately that day, the Associated Press said, oh, sorry, that's wrong. The story was wrong. And that didn't stop them, right? They kept going on about Mr. Potato Head. I think they're still going on today. I don't know. We must be in like day 6 of the Potato Head controversy, right? Non-controversy. But like we knew it was like not a story days ago, and they're just running with it.
Josh,
it's pathetic.
When I hosted and pivoted and gave liberal commentary on Alan Combs' show on Fox News, they actually gave us a list of topics I was not supposed to discuss. At the time, Roger Ailes was being investigated for sexual harassment, and that topic, to put it lightly, was strongly suggested that we avoid.
Yeah.
Meaning like there were cameras and there was going to be a hook. I really felt that. Can you talk about how like censorship and this cancel culture have invaded the journalism space on both the left and the right?
Well, I mean,
I think people are afraid to say what their true sense is in certain areas.
I mean, I would hope so. Self-censorship, this is another thing that's kind of, I think, a rather artificial argument. Like, self-censorship is something we all do all the time, and it's important. That's part of living in a society. You don't want to know what I'm thinking all the time. Believe me, you don't want to know what I'm thinking all the time. You need me to censor. No, you need me to censor my inner, right? Like,
sure,
it's important. You don't want to know what's going on. There has to be a filter, right? We always say to people, that person has no filter. Well, that's not a compliment. We're not saying, thank God that person has no filter. Let's take a step back. We are living in a society with changing norms of what is acceptable in terms of expressions of racial grievance, of gender issues. We're in a process where we are revisiting things that we had long believed in our culture and that was okay, and we're saying it's not okay. And this is a process that I think is predictably going to have some bumps along the way. It's going to piss people off along the way. And let's be honest, some people are going to face repercussions for things that they maybe should not face repercussions for along the way as society works out this change. And you can focus on, as a lot of people do, the growing pains that happen as we establish a new set of norms. I would say let's focus on the fact that we are abandoning a set of norms that did not serve a lot of people very well for a long time and need to be revised. And the new norms are actually good, but there are some growing pains along the way. And what you choose to emphasize between those two things says a lot about where you're coming from.
I think it's interesting that, say, 15 or 20 years ago, those norms were different, obviously, from the 15 or 20 years ago before that, and on down throughout history. It's just interesting how people these days think they are right, and that 20 years from now, things won't have shifted considerably as to what is being suggested as the right way on both sides of addressing these issues. The idea that we're in a process seems to get lost on the people who are self-righteous around these issues.
Yes, and a lot of people who are, the avatars of being canceled are people who, were very comfortable with the old norms and were not willing to change along with the times. And now they're portraying themselves as, victims in from some group that doesn't exist, right? I mean, that one of the things that I think is central to this conversation is that there is no woke mob that is deciding these things. It is, there's.
I was at the woke mob meeting. Did you not get your invitation?
I mean, look, there are social changes going on, and they're, again, often difficult and come with growing pains. But the right would have you believe that there is some sort of council choosing what to reject and what not to reject, and choosing to update these norms without, it's
because that's what they have. They literally have at the top of Fox News somebody handing down what you are and are not to comment.
That's right.
They have that in their elected officials. It's kind of funny when all of them come out on a day or within a day or two of each other, very concerned about the potato head issue or something similar. Obviously, that's a top-down.
Yeah.
type of messaging system that they have that they're
Yes.
adhering to. So they're
Yeah.
projecting that onto us when really we're like, I don't know if this is a good idea. Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And I mean, a lot of us are ambiguous with about a lot of these things. I mean, there's also a huge generational component that gets lost. Let's not talk about left, right. Let's talk about young people versus us middle-aged people, right? That's probably the bigger gap, I think, in terms of how we're adjusting to these issues. It is more, I would say it's more generational than it is left, right. And getting back to the very beginning of this conversation, we could have an honest conversation about all of these things if we did not have a conservative movement trying to score points about this imaginary problem on the left. And not just a conservative movement. You have this kind of, I don't even know what to call the Barry Weiss crowd, this kind of knee-jerk, contrarian, anti-left, but not really right-wingers themselves, whatever they are, that whole intellectual dark web crew.
Who do we put in there? I noticed, I don't know if let's name some names. Let's cancel these people. But yeah.
We need to cancel more people. That's the problem. We're not canceling efficiently enough.
I mean, the outcome of some of those folks are to push the country further to the right, which they ostensibly say that they're not for doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they are. Yeah, they're advancing the cause of illiberalism in the name of liberalism.
Yeah. Yes. Well, with that said, you can go Google whoever it is you think we might be looking at, or you can scroll through our personal Twitter feeds and find actual name pointing. Josh Holland's Twitter is Joshua Hall. I'm Julianna Forlano on Twitter. Final words about this. Where do you think we're going to end up with all of this, Josh?
I mean, I think that it's all a distraction, and we really need to just point that out. There's things that matter here. We're still struggling with a pandemic. We've got huge problems. We've got huge inequalities. We are fighting an anti-democratic political party that's really gone to the extreme right. And we need to not get pulled into these stupid fracases.
Well said. Josh Holland, host of We've Got Issues. Don't forget to check out that podcast. Thanks for being here with us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Julianna.